Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, looking at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Hello, and welcome back to our podcast. We are Modern Musings, three ladies that like to sit around and talk about things. I'm Amber Jones, and I'm here with my co-host, Kristen Blakely and Cindy Murray.
Hi.
Now we have another last name to learn.
Yeah,
I said it right.
you did.
I did. I'm proud of myself. Give myself a pat on the back. Okay. We're here today, and we did a podcast episode a while back about MDs and DOs, where we explained and talked about MDs versus DOs. And so this podcast, we're going to talk about holistic medicine versus modern medicine.
Traditional medicine.
Yeah, traditional. Well, it's called modern Western medicine.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Holistic medicine versus the traditional modern Western medicine. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, everybody goes to the doctor. For the most part, everybody goes to the doctor, whether they want to or not. I typically only go unless I have to. And I get one free visit a year, which is to get a physical. So I do go at least, well, I get two free visits. I get one free visit to get a physical and one free visit to get my lady body checked out.
Right.
Yeah, so like typically I don't go to the doctor unless something's really bad happening with me, like well, I'm a teacher, so I get sick occasionally because those kids come to work sick, so that makes me sick and everything like that. But I think, like, in my mind, I wish that I didn't need the traditional medicine, that I could go a more holistic approach.
It's really interesting that you talk about, because you're framing it in the I have to go to the doctor. I have to go to the doctor. And I used to say that too. We've talked about this on here a lot of times about how, I've had breast cancer, I have diabetes, I have a host of other things. And I was complaining to my therapist about I have to go to the doctor. I was just talking about my schedule in general. It's like I have to go to the doctor like every week to a different doctor for whatever. You say you only go like once or twice a year. I wind up going like every other week. I am at some doctor's office.
And that does happen with people with age.
Well,
too.
it does happen with age as well.
The older you get, the more you go to the doctor.
But I was very resistant to that too, because I went for years without going to the doctor unless I was super sick. And I just complained, I have to go to the doctor. I have to go to the doctor. And she reframed it for me, which, therapists are really good at. And she says, no, you don't have to go to the doctor. You get to go to the
very
doctor.
Fortunate.
We're very
is
fortunate
very true.
that we
We're
have
fortunate.
Western medicine.
We're fortunate to have health insurance.
And really, honestly, if I didn't have
doctors.
insurance and I didn't have Western medicine, right now, I would probably be dead.
Yeah.
I would probably be dead. I know my sister wouldn't have lived very long
Right.
either. So I do like holistic medicine, and there are some practices that I do. I don't know a lot about holistic medicine, but there are some things that I do, and I believe they work really great together. But that one should never be a substitute for the other.
Well, I was thinking it more in the sense of it could be a substitute for certain things. I know
Well, there are, yeah.
we've also done a podcast on healing migraines holistically.
Yes,
And I
yes.
feel like that I have been very successful
Right.
at my holistic migraine practices.
Right.
You know, breathing, meditation, pressure points, things to that nature, where I have okay, and like backstory, if you did not listen to that podcast, I have suffered from migraines my whole life, ever since I was little. Debilitating migraines that ended me up in bed for days at a time, not being able to see, think, move, like a really, and they had, and my migraine doctor that I went to for years had me put them in different categories from 1 to 5, 5 being the worst possible migraines. And like the whole idea, and he was kind of like a more like whole body approach. He wasn't completely holistic, but we did do a lot of whole body approaches when I did see a migraine specialist. And the goal for us was to, when I went in to see him, I was taking 6 Bayer Back and Body, which, you know, like aspirins, big, thick aspirins. I was taking 6 of them, and then 2 Benadryl extreme headaches. I was taking 8 pills every time I had a migraine. And that to me, and like I had my stomach looked at, and like, but those pills were putting holes
tearing up your stomach,
in my stomach. And so I have stomach problems.
Well,
because
and
of
Western
that.
medicine has not been very effective at treating migraines historically.
Yeah.
They really haven't. And in fact, a lot of people who suffer from migraines have been kind of brushed off like, oh, it's just a headache. Just, you know, a lot of doctors sadly do that. And, you know, take 2 aspirin and go to bed, you know. And in the early, you know, we talked about some of the early medications that weren't very effective, or that only treated some of the symptoms or whatever, because migraines are varied. You know, they affect your sensory organs. They affect a lot of different things, and you can't just treat the pain. You have to treat the effects on the sensory organs as well.
Triggers, like I've known people, like my biggest triggers, other than stress, of course, as a teacher, or just like as a child, my biggest triggers were lights, certain types of lights. The weather was probably my number one.
Allergies are a huge one for people
trigger
too. That a lot of migraines are triggered by allergies.
And so, but I've known people that, like, if they smelled the wrong thing, immediately they would get a migraine. And like that kind of medication taking is just not sustainable.
No, it's not.
And I got to a point in my life where I was like, this is not sustainable. And I tried many different things, and I looked up, you know, researched many different ways, many different pressure points, head massages, everything like that. So I've become kind of like an expert at keeping my migraines away over the past 20 years or so, when I first started treating them, that I know what medications do work, what medications don't work, and like exactly where I can massage my head to where it will go away. And you know, I've even found that, like, living in certain environments, like you said, the allergies and the weather is a big, like, trigger. I found that living in drier environments, which is not this area of Texas, completely eliminates my migraines.
Right.
Like living in the
so
high
it probably
desert.
is related to allergies, very likely then, because of the humidity here.
Yeah.
Amber, do you get itchy whenever you exercise or walk? Does your skin sometimes itch? Like when you go to scratch it, nothing happens?
She has an
Histamine.
epinephrine, a histamine. Yeah,
Yes,
it's not
a
epinephrine.
histamine.
It's a histamine
So
allergy.
I also have that problem, and when I get headaches, it's because of allergies. But I've actually been very fortunate not to get headaches. I know we had talked about this on our migraine episode, but when you started talking about that, it made me think about that, and I wonder if you, are getting your migraines, from allergens and stuff. Because if you are allergic to the histamines and they're circulating in your blood, that could be what's causing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, and you were talking about taking the Benadryl too. That's a big key because Benadryl is an antihistamine, so it blocks that histamine
it was
reaction.
it was like the aspirin wouldn't do the trick by itself. I had to add the Benadryl to it.
And I think that's the thing with looking at the Western medicine approach to like the holistic, or like a lot of people think of like homeopathic versus the allopathic approach. So allopathic is like your Western medicine, and it targets the symptoms,
and it's usually
medicine or surgery.
Medicine or surgeries. And we talked about that on the MDs and DOs.
And so like for yours, you were talking about, doing massages and other things.
Those are homeopathic.
Lifestyle changes. That's homeopathic. And, as I'm looking at like the things that, are usually the approach when it comes to homeopathic options, whenever it comes to like, hey, you could do this or you could do that. Here's an example. I don't think a lot of people want to do the homeopathic approach because the holistic or homeopathic approach is a lot more work. It's
more work, and it takes
You have
it
to
takes
change
longer.
your
and
diet.
it does take longer than a quick fix medicine, and that's what people want is a quick fix.
Yeah,
that's the unfortunate thing.
That's why Western medicine works here, because we are not the type of people that are willing.
But
to make
even if you look at the Western medicine for we're staying on this migraine topic. They've learned that caffeine helps with migraines because it shrinks the blood vessels, right? And so
coffee is like a really good coffee, and red wine are good for migraines.
And so
and dark chocolate.
Yeah. And so those things, we're learning, but they're now including caffeine in pain medication for migraines. So it's like Western medicine is opening up to
they're getting
things.
better.
Yes, they are getting better.
And if you go and you look at like the over the counter stuff, like it has proven that honey helps a lot, especially with colds.
Yeah.
Honey and cinnamon and apple cider vinegar, which I've talked about like that before in past podcasts of like my little cold tea that I make that I mix together. Like they're starting to add that stuff.
Oh yeah.
That stuff we've always known that stuff works.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is in our medical
culture,
society,
our culture has,
they can't write you a prescription for honey.
No.
And no one's going to make a profit off of you being prescribed honey.
And see, that's like my big problem with that, which I do get, Cindy, that like, if you have like Western medicine is good if you have really serious illnesses such as
I think they work together. I really think they work
like
together. But even with cancer, you have to treat it homeopathically. It's not just a matter of you don't just take radiation therapy and chemo. You have to change your diet to eliminate more sugars because sugar feeds tumors. Yeah. You have to, like in my case, it was a estrogen-based tumor because I had breast cancer, so I had to, be more careful about things that caused, that gave me estrogens in my foods, like soy and things like that. I had to be more careful. I needed to lose weight because your body fat,
change your diet.
Your body fat makes you generate estrogen. So, there's all these things that, but by the same standard, you could not treat cancer only homeopathically either.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was getting at is that like you needed the chemo and the treatments to fight your cancer.
Right.
You couldn't just do it homeopathically. Like, and I'm not saying that I 100% treat my migraines homeopathically. Like there are occasions, and I have like scaled back on them like so much. Well, a big thing, of course, was losing over 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That helped. But yeah, watching what I eat and scaling back on things that were definite migraine triggers
Right.
has helped me in the long run. Because like when I was 20 years old, when I was a kid, we grew up in the 80s. We were eating prepackaged
Oh
food,
gosh, yeah.
McDonald's,
All the processed
ramen
foods.
noodles,
Processed foods are
everything like
terrible
that.
for you. Yeah.
And once I got older and I cut back on, and I lost weight and I cut back on the processed foods and cut back on the sugars and the sodas and everything like that, my migraines started to go
Yeah.
away. And I don't have them as frequently. Now, like I probably get a category, like I couldn't even tell you the last time I had a category 5.
Yeah.
And I only take my migraine medicine if I have category 4s or 5s, because I can live and function on categories 3s, 2s, and 1s.
Uh-huh.
1 being like a slight headache, it only hurts for like a second type thing. Like I can function on those things, give myself a quick head massage and everything like that. 4s and 5s are a little bit different. Like my senses are messed up and I have to lay down pretty much, especially 5s. I call it like a total migraine where everything hurts.
Everything
like it
hurts. You want to
screams.
throw up,
I
and your
want to
hair
throw
hurt.
up and
Your hair feels
scream,
like it
and
has
yeah.
nerve endings in the end of it. Yeah.
And I probably the last time I had one of those was a few years ago.
Yeah, I haven't had one. I used to have migraines as well. I
Yeah.
started having them when I was 16 years old, and the first one I had was so debilitating. I was driving a car, and I had to pull over to the side of the road. It hit me all of a sudden, and I couldn't drive anymore. My friend had to drive, and she didn't even know how to drive a stick shift, and it was kind of a scary thing. But
Mhm.
and I later learned that was a migraine, and I had them until about the time I got pregnant with Steven. And I think my hormones changed enough.
Yeah, that's another thing that definitely contributes.
And when I got pregnant with him, I stopped having pain migraines. And I can't tell you the last time I had one. I mean, I really don't have them very often. But I do occasionally get optical migraines where you see stars or a flash of light or whatever.
Now I do get those.
And I still get those, but they're not painful. I can go through, work through them or whatever. So
stress definitely brings those on in me.
Yeah.
Like at work, I get them a lot at work, and it looks like the world is bent.
oh yeah,
Wow.
Like my doctor called them auras,
uh-huh.
and there are like I can't take because I get those, which it's kind of like a brain glitch, I guess. I can't take certain medications because it increases my risk of stroke.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I cannot take like hormone medications.
Uh-huh.
Even though like I have like I'm going through menopause, or I've gone through
Right.
it, I guess. I cannot take hormone supplements
Right. I don't
because
recommend
of
them
those
anyway.
aura migraines.
Yeah, I don't recommend them anyway.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, I
Sorry.
wasn't like I took them for a while, and I wasn't a huge fan.
Yeah.
You know, same with like birth control or whatever,
Yep.
because that's also like a
Same
hormone
thing, yep.
supplement. Like I'm just I'm not a huge fan of taking pills unless I have to.
Yep.
And for sure, like I have like a medication that I occasionally take for sciatica, my old age thing that I've developed over the last few years. And
You can
that
fix,
actually,
you can fix that too.
yeah, I know that's I'm working
Good
on that.
chiropractor.
You gotta get go to the chiropractor, and It's because like one of my legs is shorter than the other because of my knee surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Like my left, and it's all like the whole problem is in my left leg because I had all of the cartilage removed from that knee. That leg is shorter than the other, and one
They
of
can
my hips is higher than the other.
they
Like
can
my
adjust
body's,
it though. They can adjust
yeah,
you. Yeah, they can.
Every week I go into the chiropractor because I've been going every week now, and every time they have me lay on my stomach, and I can tell when they're checking my feet.
Yeah, they touch
They
your feet.
try to
Yeah.
line my feet up, and they go, and then
Well,
they wiggle on my hip, and then they pull up
Move
my
your
hip,
hip in
and
the
then
right
they pull
place.
my
Yeah.
leg down, and
Yep.
they're like, now they match.
Yep.
Every time.
Me too. Yeah.
My right
Well,
leg.
speaking of holistic medicine, that's
I mean,
another example of
And it's
the-
one that was poo-pooed upon, you know.
It still is.
It kind of still is by a lot of
still
doctors.
is.
Doctors are more open to it now, but it's still, you know, a lot of them think that it's, you know, pseudoscience or whatever. I can tell you right now, you know, if you can x-ray someone and see that their bones are out of alignment, give them an adjustment, and then see that their bones are back in alignment where they're supposed to be, that is not pseudoscience.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not. It's manipulation. It's the same as doing physical therapy or anything like that. You're just trying to get
Yeah.
that bone to go back where it's supposed to go. And, you know, think about it. If your hips are off and your leg is longer, it's going to cause all kinds of not only discomfort, but damage to your spine, to your hips, to your knees. Long-term damage. And so I believe very firmly in going to the chiropractor and getting that stuff worked out. And I go about once a month now because we've gotten kind of where I'm straightened out, and I have the core exercises that keep my core strong, you know, and keep that stuff from shifting. Because once you get where you're in that habit of getting those adjustments and you build the strength of your core, it will keep your body from getting out of alignment again as quickly. So I only go about once a month. I can always tell when it's time to go because I start getting a backache.
Yeah.
And my hip, I can tell because one leg will hit the ground harder than the other when I'm walking because one is longer than the other or shorter than the other. And so I believe in it. And I know, there's this old, maybe an old adage or whatever that some people used to say that, well, don't go to the chiropractor because once you go, you'll always have to go. And it's not that. I have to correct that because going to the chiropractor does not make you have to go back to the chiropractor. What happens is that when they adjust you and you feel the way you're supposed to be,
you never want to not.
You never want to not feel
That's
like
why
that
I've been
again.
going every week now.
And so I go back.
Instantly,
it's like, put this shoulder back where it's supposed to be. Put this hip back where it's supposed to be because it hurts, and I don't want to feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine is really interesting because I started going to the Joint, which is like a membership plan.
Yes.
You pay like once a month, and then you go, however many times, that's needed. And so I've been going on Sunday, and it's interesting because I noticed, and the reason I started going on Sunday was because I tend to sleep in a little bit more on the weekends, and when I wake up, I'm having more hip and back pain. And so by Sunday, 2 days in a row of sleeping in and having a little bit of discomfort, I'm like, man, I really need to go to the chiropractor. And I did it last week. I woke up and I was like, man, my back really hurts today. And then I walked around the house going, man, my back really hurts today. Man, my back really hurts today. And then I was like, Kristen, just go to the chiropractor.
Right.
Because it's the way their system works is you just walk in and
you don't
you're
have to have
in
an
and out.
appointment or anything.
No, you don't have to have an appointment. It's very quick. And I literally walked in right before they closed. I got my adjustment. I got back home and I was like, why did I wait all day? And I could have just gone and got it done. And I always feel so much better. Because the back pain that I was having was like almost like crippling me.
Right.
Because I would wake up every morning with the same back pain. And now I'm getting to a point where it's just once a week. And even this morning, waking up, I didn't have that back pain. So I'm starting to see now that it's like, okay, it's not as bad. And even though my pain was hurting last Sunday, it wasn't like, I wasn't at the point where I couldn't sit up and lay down and stuff. Like, I was having a hard time moving that part of my hips and my back, like bending over and stuff. Like, I would get kind of stuck. And now I'm not even having that problem. It's just, a little stiff. So I think as I continue to keep going, those muscles that are being pulled in the wrong direction aren't being overly pulled for too long. And so that's actually what's hurting is the muscles and the nerves that are getting pinched when I'm in the wrong position or wrong place. Because mine is all muscle pain. Because when my hips are out of alignment, then I start pulling on these muscles in my pelvic area. And what ends up happening is they get overstrained to the point where I also start getting kind of like a Charlie horse cramp in my back. Mm-hmm. And just from standing, it'll start to build up and my muscle will
just knot.
Spaz and knot. Yeah. And then it's just like, oh my gosh, I have this really tense muscle. And now that I've been going more regularly to the chiropractor, I'm not having that problem so much. I was one of those type of people that would just go when I was having a back emergency. I would go for that one single adjustment and then disappear for a year. And then come back when my neck, was having a crick in my neck. But I'm really glad I started going and getting my little membership there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sad that a lot of people poo-poo on chiropractic care. It's actually in the same type of category as massage, yoga, meditation, and acupuncture.
Well, and the thing is that a good doctor will recognize that all of those things are useful tools in keeping you healthy.
Yeah.
And
diet and exercise.
Those practitioners will never tell you not to go to a doctor. They will, if there is something beyond what they are capable of dealing with, they are the first ones to say, I can't do this. You've got to go to a doctor. The first thing I did the first time I went to the chiropractor was get an x-ray. He looked at the x-ray to see what was going on with my joints. And in fact, my husband, Mark, when he went the first time he went to a chiropractor, he was same chiropractor. He got an x-ray and the guy says, you have spondylolisthesiosis. This is a really odd, kind of rare disorder that happens to people where parts of their spinal column are missing. So it happened his probably happened due to an accident, but it can also be genetic. So we don't know. But what happens is there's little spurs on your spinal discs, vertebrae, on your vertebrae. Sorry, my words are I'm old. And there's these little spines on them. They kind of stick out, these little fins that stick out. And those keep those vertebrae from pinching on each other. So when you bend your back, it keeps it from bending too far. And in spondylolisthesiosis, it's a mouthful of a word, those little spines are knocked off. And so then your spine actually crimps down onto the other vertebrae. And he had been to the doctor 20 years trying to figure out why his back would suddenly just seize up for no reason. He would just wake up in the morning and his back would be seized up and he couldn't get out of bed. And he would go to the doctor and they x-rayed him and they did all these things. And then all they could do was give him some pain meds and say, go to bed and rest it off. And then finally, this doctor said, oh, you have spondylolisthesiosis. This chiropractor noticed this. And because he had another patient who had it. And he treated him without medication. He taught him, he adjusted his spine And then they talked about core building, his abdominal core muscles, building those muscles to support his spine. And that's what kept his pain away. So building up his abs was what
He needed to
that's
get
what he
out of
needed
Yeah.
for all of this time. And no other doctor had ever suggested that. No other doctor had ever said
Take the time to do the
even
X-rays.
they did the
Oh,
X-rays.
yeah.
They did the
They just
X-rays
didn't-
and they missed it.
Yeah.
So, I think that like I say, there's a lot of traditional Western medicine doctors who think the only answer is surgery or medication, and they hardly ever recommend you go get a massage or go to a chiropractor or go get acupuncture or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have actually been to some really great doctors, and like I've mentioned before, I go to an OD, and the things that they tend to recommend are, they try all different kinds of things, including aromatherapy, including dietary changes, dietary supplements, exercise, yoga, because yoga builds your muscle strength, it builds your core, it builds your balance, and building all those things helps prevent injuries to your spine and other parts of your body. And I feel like, a good doctor should be looking at those things in addition to any medication that might be called for. And I wanted to bring one thing really quick, because I found this, because when you mentioned doing the topic holistic medicine, I thought,
Yeah.
well, what really defines holistic medicine? And I found this quote, and it said, holistic healing integrates body, mind, emotions, and soul in order to find and treat the source of a disease. Symptoms that the body creates are only indications that something in mind and soul needs healing. Stop treating the symptoms and try to go deep within to find the root. And I think that's the thing right there, is that doctors often try to treat the symptoms. Let's just alleviate the symptoms and you'll
Yeah.
feel okay. And good medicine and good holistic medicine or homeopathic medicine or whatever not only treats the symptoms, but searches for the root cause and addresses that, or adds in preventative measures to, like for your migraines, by knowing what causes your migraines. Instead of just treating the migraine, knowing what causes the migraine helps you avoid getting one in the first
Yeah.
place. And I like that. I like that a lot. And my doctor puts me on a lot of supplements, a lot of vitamins and mineral supplements and things like that. Now, some people say, well, that's taking medicine, you're taking pills. But it's things that we normally should get in our diet, but because our diets are so not healthy, we don't get those things. And so I don't mind adding supplements to my diet to help me stay healthy. And so at 60 years old, I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have high cholesterol. My blood is pretty thin. It doesn't clot too quickly or anything like that, because I take CoQ10 and I take omega-3 fatty acid, supplements, and I take a host of other things that help keep my body in a good balance of health. And they help support my heart. They help support my diabetes and all those things. And so I would rather take those things all day long than take some kind of pill that's gonna, like a statin, to lower my
Yeah.
cholesterol, that has so many side effects that are so negative that it's not worth taking. And that's the way a lot of medicines are. There's so many side effects to the medicines that the side effects are often even worse than just leaving it alone, And
Yes.
same thing with surgeries. You know, people go for that drastic. I think I've talked about this before too. I tore up the meniscus in my left knee, and I went to 4 doctors, and one of the 4 doctors told me I needed a total knee replacement. That was his knee jerk reaction, pun intended. And 2 of the doctors offered surgery, one with and one without stem cells, and then another doctor offered just stem cells without surgery. I wound up going to the doctor who gave me surgery and stem cells because it seemed like the most holistic way to treat it, because the stem cells can help regrow the tissue in the knee, but first you had to go in and cut out the torn parts that were in the way and floating around, and clean it all up. So I had the surgery, they cleaned up my meniscus, and then I got the stem cell injections in my knee. And my knee, he was hoping to give me 5 more years before I might have to have another something or another happen, and it's been 9. And my knee, I can still bend my knee enough to touch my heel to my butt cheek. So, and before I could just barely move it. And I think that's phenomenal holistic approach to medicine. And, you know, I could have just done the stem cells, but I still would have had all that floating cartilage in there, and it could have still caused problems. So that's why I opted for the package deal.
Yeah.
But to just go in and I think of it now, and I'm thinking I could be walking around with a titanium knee right now. And everybody I know who's had a knee replacement has had horrible results from it. And they're so stiff they can't barely walk, and they have to use a walker or a cane, or they can't climb stairs and all that stuff. And I don't have that problem. And to me, it's horrifying that a doctor would just go straight to that. So, you know, I do believe in holistic medicine. I believe in starting with the least, not start out with the most aggressive treatment, start out with the least aggressive treatment. Find the natural, naturopathic, homeopathic, holistic ways to treat it first, and see if that works. And then, you know, then you progress through the steps. But yeah, never go straight to the, you know.
Well, and again, I think that's also like our nature as people to, some people will put things off until it's too late.
That's true also.
And so sometimes the holistic approach,
it's too late for that.
It's too late for that. And
that
that's
is
one
true.
of the criticisms of holistic approach, is that it's weak and it doesn't necessarily help stave off, you know, pain and discomfort, or even prevent other things from, you know, catastrophically getting worse. Whereas, you know, in some cases the surgery is needed to fix something quick. And that's where, like, our Western medicine is far better in a lot of other countries than a lot of other countries, because we have high standards with our surgeries and with, you know, the other ways that we approach things. You know, being able to offer someone different options for a cancer diagnosis versus like, well, this is all we have and it's not enough.
Right. Well, and, you know, in talking about that cancer diagnosis, going back to the holistic, I mean, you know, right now, if somebody has a cancerous tumor in their body, you're not going to be able to treat that holistically by itself.
Exactly.
Now, but if you back up, let's back up.
To lifestyle, yeah.
Lifestyle.
Holistically,
you could prevent the cancer in the first place, because I have an estrogen positive breast cancer.
Had
I known that it was, that I had that, you know, then I could have, and probably should have, avoided any kind of hormone therapies, which I did not. I took birth control, you know, as a younger adult, and I could have kept my weight off.
avoided things like soy sauce.
Yes, I could have done all those things, and maybe I never would have gotten the cancer in the first place. So it still is treatable holistically,
Yeah.
but
Funny thing is that how you found out that you had that BRCA gene.
well, yeah, I don't have
Oh,
the BRCA
you don't
gene.
have the BRCA gene.
No, I do.
But
Well,
the only
yeah.
reason that they test for that is because
You
it's
have
part
breast
of
cancer.
Western medicine's diagnostic services that they can do something like that. Because Western medicine leans more on scientific evidence and fact, whereas a lot of the other naturopathic and homeopathic, there's not as much scientific evidence to prove how it works.
Right.
And like taking massage, for example, as a method to cure something or treat something. It's not standardized enough to because it's so personalized to the person that it can't be.
And some people say that it's all psychosomatic.
Exactly.
So same thing with Reiki, which I recently another holistic method of treatment. I recently got my Reiki 3 certification to become a Reiki master, and some people go, well, that's just all a bunch of hoo-ha, but if you do Reiki on someone and they feel better after you've done it, who's to say that it's not valuable?
And that's why for me, like, I take my vitamins because I don't care if it's placebo effect or not. When I take my vitamins, I always feel better.
Yeah. And I agree. I totally agree.
Because half of it is believing that it works.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which is that positive attitude that is part of homeopathic.
Which is also part of that thing, when like as a breast cancer survivor, they tell you that your attitude has a lot to deal with your recovery. And if you have that positive attitude and you're willing to fight it and keep going, then you will. Or, chances are that you will. But if you go, oh crap, I've got cancer, I'm going to die, then you probably will. So, yeah.
For sure. I mean, like, your brain does some amazing and terrible things. Like,
it does.
It can, if you maintain a positive attitude, then that everything's going to be okay, that you're going to make it through it, then you most likely will. But if you're sitting there like, oh, I'm so sad, I'm dying, I'm going to die, then, it's going to speed it along.
It does. It absolutely does. Your brain can actually make you sick. And I've seen this happen over and over again with people who get critical diagnoses, and once they're told that it's bad, that's it. They're done and they give up. I've seen it happen over and over again, particularly with elderly people. They just give up. And from that point on, it's just downhill really fast. So, but I do think that, I'm never going to say don't use Western medicine because, but I do like having that, that holistic approach, using every available tool at your disposal is basically what it is. It just, if changing the way you eat or drinking a, bunch of apple cider vinegar makes your ulcer go away, then do it. By all means, do it. And even if it's just in your head, if it works, it works.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And that's all we can really say is do what works for you.
But don't close your mind to options that may be out there, because even science learns continually. They find things, just like I was talking about with the caffeine. More research, they learn that other things help, other things change the outcome of injury and disease. And so try whatever you think you can try and see if it works.
For sure.
Because just because science hasn't said right now that it's what works doesn't mean that they won't. It's just that the research isn't there to back it yet.
Yeah. The scientists are focusing on other things.
Yeah, they are. I mean, really, scientists work on the things that are going to, scientists are funded by people trying to make money. Drug companies or whatever, pharmaceutical, chemical companies, and
manufacturers.
And that funding that, is contingent on them coming up with something that is going to make that company money. So they're not going to research whether caffeine helps migraines, because that's not going to help them sell anything, because then people could just go drink a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. They don't want, or take a caffeine pill or whatever. They want something that's new, groundbreaking,
that only they have access to.
To. And so that's it. It taints what's available. It really does. It taints their view of what works. And it doesn't mean that the other stuff doesn't work. It just means that they're not going to make any money off of it. So they're not going to research it. They will not research it. So it's up to you to just research it yourself.
Mm-hmm. You can do your own experiments.
You absolutely can. Go drink a cup of coffee when you get a migraine. See if it helps.
See how many cups you can get away with before you get the oohs.
Okay, right.
Oh, well, gosh, I do that every day.
Oh,
right?
Me too.
That's how you keep your
Maybe
migraines
that's
away.
why we don't have any migraines.
Yeah, because we
drink
like
so much
coffee. Exactly.
Yeah,
I
that's
drink
why
coffee
I
all
never
day
get
long.
headaches. I've been drinking coffee religiously for my entire life.
Right. All right.
All right, so what are we talking about next week?
Next week, Kristen is our hostess, and we are
going to discuss what we are currently watching, listening to, reading, and all that good stuff.
Oh,
good,
I've got a
good,
big
good.
list.
Me too.
I'm like reading like 3 books right now.
Me
So
too. And watching lots of things.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
All
yes,
right,
yes.
so we'll play catch up next week then.
Yay,
all
fun.
right.
Fun and fluff. We like that, don't we?
Well, okay, we'll talk to you, not see you, next time.
Bye.
Bye.